For the longest time, much of Gaston's life had been shrouded behind a single song, but now it looks like much of it has been laid out for fans by creators that work with Disney to build off of some of the world's most beloved characters. Much of what fans can learn about Gaston actually comes from a book that was written about the prince before he was cursed and transformed into the monstrous beast. As a matter of fact, it's through the book The Beast Within, A Tale of Beauty's Prince by Serena Valentino that she revealed that Gaston and Beast were really good friends. That is, before everything went wrong. Disney originally showed viewers that Gaston wasn't the type of person who treasured relationships or friendship, but that wasn't always the case. Long before he was ever close with his companion LeFou, Gaston only had one friend that he truly held in high regard, and according to The Beast Within, that friend was the very same beast that he would try to kill later on in life. Only at that point in their lives, Beast was still simply a prince and one that seemed to mirror Gaston's character, or perhaps it was the other way around. Either way, almost immediately, Serena Valentino established that Prince and Gaston were really similar to each other, which led to a really strong friendship. Honestly, the only difference between the two was their social standing. While the prince was obviously a member of high society or the upper class, Gaston was nowhere close. His family lived in the nearby village and worked hard to get by, just like everyone else did. But surprisingly, in the book, the two still managed to get along really well. And that was despite the disdain that the book described the prince having for the lower-class citizens in his kingdom. The prince could clearly see the similarities that he and Gaston shared, so he was able to look past his status and actually form a really strong bond with the young hunter. And that bond ended up growing into a friendship between the two that would last up until the moment that it all went wrong. Now, at first, it might seem odd to think that the prince and Gaston would be such good friends, but after seeing how much the two have in common, it's even odder to think that this wasn't brought up before. You see, as soon as you start to read Valentino's book, you might get a feeling that you recognize the prince for some reason, and that's because he's practically a mirror image of Gaston from the movie, at least in terms of his personality. In The Beast Within, both characters were depicted as having egos that were bigger than the living planet. Marvel joke, which is probably why they were so fond of each other. On top of that, both Gaston and the prince were shown to be avid hunters and often went on hunts together. This matches Gaston's character in the original animated film, who boasted about his hunting abilities through song. Honestly, the strangest part of their friendship in the book was the fact that Gaston was considered lower class, but when you realize that he was disgusted by the lowly people of the village just as much as the prince was, then it's easier to see what they bonded over. Valentino also mentioned in her book that Gaston and the prince would spend a lot of their free time just hanging around the tavern in order to have the women in the village look at them. Yet another thing that they did together to fuel their already massive egos. Gaston and the prince had such a strong friendship that the only thing that ever came between them, according to the book, was a woman, and that woman happened to be Belle, who actually attended the prince's ball according to Valentino. But when she caught the prince's eye, Gaston lied to her and told him that she wasn't worth the time, specifically to keep Belle available for himself. Despite that little lie, though, Gaston and the prince had a friendship that seemed to be a lifelong one, though that would quickly change when both men let their narcissism get the best of them. Things started to take a turn in their friendship when Gaston thought that he was doing the prince a favor and indirectly caused his friend to become the beast that Disney introduced the world to. You see, as the book made clear, the prince didn't like many people from the lower class and did his best not to associate with them. In fact, the only two people that weren't his servants that the prince really interacted with were his best friend Gaston and his fiancée Cersei. And the prince knew that Gaston wasn't a noble and didn't have any official status, but what he didn't know, and that Gaston discovered for him, was that neither did Cersei. Due to their friendship in The Beast Within, Gaston decided to warn his friend when he discovered that Cersei came from a family of pig farmers. However, in doing so, Gaston set off a chain of events that would change the course of his friendship with the prince forever. After Gaston learned the truth about Cersei, Valentino explained in her book that he immediately went and told the prince. Gaston warned the prince that if he went through with the engagement and the people found out, it would bring shame to his kingdom. And as the book showed, the prince was as superficial and egotistical as Gaston, so he decided to heed his friend's warning, though that's not before dismissing it and claiming that Gaston was just trying to pull some cruel trick. Gaston didn't risk his reputation with the prince on just words, though, and after telling him about Cersei, Gaston brought his friend to her farm to show him proof. Little did he know, though, that would lead to the exact event that got the prince cursed in the first place, which would be what destroyed their otherwise perfect friendship. After Gaston convinced the prince to break off his engagement with Cersei, the Beast Within revealed that Cersei was actually a relative to a very powerful trio of witches known as the Odd Sisters, and because the prince humiliated Cersei and broke off their engagement, the Odd Sisters convinced her to curse him in a similar manner to the way the prince was cursed in the original Disney film. Granted, there were a few major differences. For instance, instead of an immediate transformation from prince to beast, the change happened over the course of a couple months. But the gist of the curse was still the same. If the prince didn't find true love by the time the final rose petal fell, he would be doomed to remain the beast that he became for the rest of his life. Gaston was also affected by the curse according to the book. He just didn't realize it. But much like all the other villagers who didn't work inside the castle, once the prince transformed, Gaston would lose all memories of their friendship and time together. Neither of the characters really believed that the curse would have any effects on them, but they were wrong, and it ended up messing up everything, including their bond. The book explained that over time, the curse began to take hold, and the prince tried to break it by getting engaged to a princess named Tulip from a neighboring kingdom. However, when that didn't work out, the prince blamed Tulip for not loving him and had Gaston, who was still his friend, escort her out of the castle and banish her back to her kingdom. Slowly, Gaston became the only person to remain in the prince's life, though that would quickly change. You see, as Serena's book explained, everything about the prince was becoming more beast-like, including his attitude. And one day, while Gaston was out hunting with the prince, he was almost attacked when the prince's beast intuitions began to take over. Sadly, that basically marked the end of their friendship, though it wasn't by Gaston's choice. It was just that, after the prince almost attacked his friend, he locked himself away in the castle and shut out the rest of the world, including Gaston. And as mentioned before, once the curse was in full effect, Gaston lost all memory of the years he spent forming that friendship with the prince. It was all gone in an instant, and Gaston didn't even realize that any of his memories were missing. The saddest part about their friendship, though, came long after it had all ended, and Gaston unknowingly betrayed his oldest friend. Gaston's betrayal of the prince realistically came at the hands of the Odd Sisters, who convinced Cersei to place the curse that turned him into the Beast in the first place. Valentino revealed that a lot of the darker scenes and events that occurred in Beauty and the Beast were actually caused by the Odd Sisters, as they believed that the prince didn't deserve a second chance. Not only were they the ones who were responsible for everyone forgetting about the prince and the castle's existence, practically getting rid of any chance that someone would come to help him, but they also were responsible for the wolves surrounding the area. Serena explained in her book that the trio of witches were the ones who sent the wolves to attack Belle to specifically stop her from forming a connection with the beast. And when all else failed, they looked toward the prince's former best friend as a way to get back at him, with Gaston being none the wiser about the manipulation. You see, it was apparently only under the Odd Sisters' influence that Gaston wanted to put Belle's father Maurice into a mental institution. According to the Beast Within, they were messing with Gaston's head and had fully convinced him that putting her father in an asylum would cause Belle to fall in love with him. And though that obviously didn't work, it wasn't the only time that the witches tried to use Gaston against his former friend. After more manipulation from Cersei's sisters, Gaston ended up attacking the prince's castle, where the two used to spend so much time together, and when the opportunity arose, he literally stabbed his former friend in the back. Though the two were really close friends throughout their childhood, Gaston couldn't recognize the prince or even remember him after the curse had taken hold, and it's heartbreaking to think that he was genuinely trying to kill his friend. Out of curiosity, though, do you think that Gaston might have tried to help the prince if he knew about the curse and could remember him after the transformation? Or would his ego have prevented him from helping such a hideous beast? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.